Welcome back to another episode of the Schmoofcast, which means you are here with the Schmoofs, Brett and Kristen. Between us, we have about 20 years experience in the themed entertainment and hospitality industry with an extreme love for theme parks, and we're hoping to share some of that with you. We discussed some really interesting topics in our opinion. We hope you find them so as well. Today, in particular, is going to be a really interesting topic, huh?
Yeah. So today's topic is going to be actually attraction with personalities. The personality of attractions.
The personality of attractions.
And we've touched on this before. If you recall, we did an episode with...
talking about the guest experience between Rise of the Resistance and Smuggler's Run at Galaxy's Edge, and touched a little bit about how the fun atmosphere of one is so contradicted in the very serious atmosphere of the other. But there's so many better examples of how this is done. And we're going to also talk about Disney has been doing some interesting things where they are rewriting attractions, or as they're retheming them, they are changing up those personalities. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those that we like versus ones we don't like. But I think some great examples of personality and attraction, specifically talking about different kind of personalities within attractions, are at Animal Kingdom.
Yeah. So amazing personality of an attraction, and kind of what we mean is not the ride itself, because the ride itself can be whatever you put on top of it. It's about the overall experience, the pre-show, the voices, the joking around, just the nature of the attraction. And Dinosaur has this amazing personality that I don't think they've been able to replicate since they built it.
I don't think so. I think that there's something hilarious about Dinosaur. And the personality of that attraction is really given to you in the pre-show, in the safety instructions, and even with some of the onboard audio. But it's taking things that is a really dark, very loud, pretty scary attraction if you aren't expecting anything, and it's putting a really light twist on it. Personally, I think Dr. Seeker is one of the best characters that Disney has created for an attraction to bring lightness to it. You're going to remember when you get off that ride, going into that safety spiel and having him use that dinosaur hand puppet to go, "Hello there."
It's very memorable. And I mean, even discussing this, we were forgetting half the pre-show was even before that even happened.
Bill Nye the Science Guy.
No, not with that. With Dr. Marsh.
Dr. Marsh.
Explaining that the time rover, and there was a breakthrough in technology, and they built the time rover, this and that. You forget that all exists. It's all out the door, because once Dr. Seeker comes on screen, that's all you remember.
It's hilarious.
He's fun. It's very fast-paced. It's very witty.
There's also a great moment that I think in that where Dr. Seeker is obviously doing his own ridiculous thing, and Dr. Marsh walks in, and she is talking to him in one way, and then she turns and faces the camera and uses what
we would call the guest voice.
The guest voice. So you will hear this sometimes or you will know it if you work in customer service, if you work in retail, if you work in any service industry, you know what a guest voice is. And I fully understand
It's
this.
funny. It's super funny.
We've gotten to the point where my guest voice, I could talk to you using my guest voice, and you didn't know it was me.
Yeah. With the phone specifically. I can't tell it's you.
So we all know that moment where you just kind of switch on and suddenly become very happy and a different person. And I love seeing that moment on screen because it's, for me, as someone who has been in the service industry, it's very relatable.
It's super meta.
It's funny. It's just funny.
It's funny, but I mean, Seeker's entire goofball personality sets up from one of the first things he says, and he's a very selfish and like kind of an absent-minded professor type deal here. But his goals are very monotone. They're very singular. He wants what he wants, and he's going to put whatever he can. He's going to use whatever he can to get what he wants, regardless if that puts you in harm's way or not.
But he doesn't think it will.
No, but he doesn't. He's not sure. That's the thing. His first verbiage to you is, "Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about you and how you can help me make history today." So he's trying to deviate and say, "Oh, it's about you," but it's really about me.
It's really about him. But I think throughout even the onboard audio, there's this great bit of humor, like when you're going past a dinosaur after you've gone past the Carnotaurus, and like, nope, not our dino, but at least this one's a vegetarian, as a joke of, oh yeah, that last one was going to eat you. So it's just those little quibs that bring a bit of lightness and humor to, again, if you've done Dinosaur without the onboard audio, it is terrifying.
It is.
It is a scary, scary ride. And I like scary rides, but that one freaked me out. We went on it, we've done it before, where the audio malfunctioned in our car, and it just didn't go off. So they have noises going on for all of those scenes that you're going through. It's not just onboard audio, and it's terrifying.
It is. I can't imagine, like, being stuck in that building for whatever reason. Like, it's nerve-wracking.
We've been stuck for like a couple minutes at a time, like 10 to 15 minutes, and they turn off like the onboard audio, but they still have like the effects and everything going on. It's terrifying.
Creepy. Very creepy. But we look at that as a good example of a personality trait for an attraction. It has this very, goofball personality.
Because you get off the ride thinking about how much fun you had, not the fact that it was scary. And I don't know if I just feel that way as an adult or whatever, but you get off it and you have a laugh about it.
Yeah. Everybody has a laugh about it. Even if it was scary, it's still a lighthearted type scary. It works. It works super well. Whereas they tried to emulate the same kind of, wacky professor type deal with the Avatar Flight of Passage.
Ugh.
And Dr. Stevens, he comes off as this amateur, brand new intern type deal to the Pandora Conservation Initiative. And he kind of is he's just getting used to his bearings. But the way it's acted out...
Just the person you want walking you through that.
Exactly. And I guess that's the part they tried to, steal from Dinosaur, that it doesn't work because the rest of Flight of Passage just has this serious undertone. You're then greeted with this intern who is a little bit goofy and off the rails.
And then from there, like even within the context of that, he is there to show you a very serious video, right? So you're watching Dr. Ogden's video explaining what this ritual that you're about to go through is, explaining that it has been consented by the Na'vi for them to be doing this and all of these things. And that humor, it just misses. It is something that you remember. It is definitely a personality trait because you get off afterwards and you talk about how awkward that was. And I think that it's part of it. I think he's said that was part of it, that awkward kind of gangly.
Yeah, the actor he's on social media. He's a pretty chill dude, but he has come out and he has said that, that was the direction, that was how they wanted it to be portrayed. And he nailed it. He did an amazing job.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that push for humor right there doesn't quite hit it. It does come across as awkward. And it's just a weird moment to have before going into, like, sit in that linked chair and go through that entire experience that is Flight of Passage. You literally go like, wait, what? Why? What is... Huh?
It's a weird thing, but it's such a weird personality for the attraction. I really kind of think it works.
I know you do.
I really enjoy it. To the point where I've been told numerous times on Twitter that I'm wrong. One of my favorite things is that, of course, the closed captioning is on in the pre-show. If you watch as Dr. Stevens is speaking, the closed captioning is delayed by a second or two on each word. Yeah. Because it's meant to show that he's just... speaking
to you live.
That's it.
That it's being translated into closed captioning as he's speaking. But Dr. Ogden, since it's a video, obviously the closed captioning is...
It's already there before she starts talking. It's a little the small details like that. Like, there is a personality to this attraction. Whether or not it's agreed upon, if it's good or not, that's a different story.
But it's there. It was an active choice. They could have had it be a very smooth transition. And having the actor come out and say, like, well, this really was the direction that he was given for that role, shows that they did think about it. Maybe they did want that little bit of awkward lab technique thing going on. And it is part of that personality of the attraction. So we're not saying that it is bad. I don't think that there is a thing as bad personality. there can be a thing of lack of personality, but I think that there is no such thing as if they've given an attraction a personality, I feel like it just is an extra step and an extra effort that it shouldn't be thought of as bad. There can be lack of personality.
Oh, there's lack of personality, all right. Let's jump over to Epcot for a second then. Let's talk about Test Track. Test Track 1.0 to 2.0.
And this is an interesting one, or this is an interesting shift, because thinking of those other two attractions, they're not the same. They are like Flight of Passage and Dinosaur are almost as far as you can get, besides both of them being a high-ticket attraction. Looking at the same attraction, that again, this is a great branch from personality to non-personality.
To nothing. It's I'm going to sound rude here for a second. They neutered it. They made Test Track into this very flashy, Tron-looking ride that just, it doesn't have any personality. It's all this very sterile and robotic and honestly boring script and verbiage. It's not fun.
I think that it's just lacking that connection. Let's talk. Tell me what you loved about Test Track 1.0. You were a big fan of it. I didn't do it nearly as often as you did.
I liked it because it kind of had the same feeling as Dr. Seeker with Dinosaur, that you were being sent on this crashed collision course by these two people that are there just being like, oh, we're going to see what happens. Screw it. Let's go.
Well, obviously they're doing it for a purpose. They're there to test results, and they were there, hence why it's called Test Track.
And they explain this in the pre-show, and you're with Sherry and Bill McKim, and they explain in the pre-show that you're here at one of the GM test facilities, so one big ones around the nation, and you're here to test cars, and every piece of the car needs to go through rigorous testing before it's ever allowed off the test track and onto the regular road, so you can get behind the wheel of a car. So all this stuff goes through rigorous testing, and they're putting up the test schedule for you to jump into these test cars as a test dummy and see what really happens. So you go through different blocks and different braking patterns and anti-lock brakes and heat and cold and twists and turns and everything else. And everybody always talks about this is Bill's like, hey, we might even throw a few surprise tests in there. And Sherry questions it. She's like, what do you mean surprise tests? And he's like, yeah, go ahead and pick one. And it's just kind of this willy-nilly of like, yeah, whatever is happening is happening.
Whatever you want.
So she picks, of course, the crashing one. Everybody was always like, oh, we're going to crash. Like, this is going to happen.
Yeah, the one where it shows you a little clip of the car going face first into a wall.
And Bill was verbiage at that point. He says, if this whole routine seems a bit intense, you're absolutely right. But that's what being a test track is all about. And he's just kind of nonchalant and ignoring the car just crashed. We're going to go through a car crash test.
It's almost as if he didn't notice, and he's just kind of like skirting by, and she's just like, no, I'm going to press a button. But it's a great gag for the audience that it feels like he missed. And so everyone is like watching this video and like, wait, what? Huh? How are they going to, what? And they keep going on.
And then on the ride, you have the verbiage, they're back with you again in the car. One of the first things is they're reminding you of the seatbelt check is up ahead. And Bill's like, your seatbelt should be buckled at all times, as they should be in any moving vehicle. So it's not just a, hey, you're on a ride. It's like a, hey, whenever you're driving a car, make sure you have your seatbelt on. It's kind of like that playing in the real world type environment too. And you start going through some of the tests, and they interact with you back and forth. One of the first tests is when the anti-lock brakes fail. And they're like, oh, that sucked. We'll try it again with the anti-lock brakes this time. You go through the environmental chambers, and Sherry's like, hey, did you remember to turn off those robots? And Bill just goes, and that's it. It's just,
and then you get sprayed in the face with something.
It's all this tongue-in-cheek kind of like...
It felt so... Is it wrong of me to make this comparison? But when I think of Test Track 1.0, it really reminds me of the show Home Improvement.
Oh, very much so, yeah. Of like, they're experts, they know what they're doing, but there's always this kind of like wacky hijinks going on.
There's always something that's happening. And for some reason, when I think of it, it just gives me that same impression. And I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was great. And then...
it was a great ride. Down to even jumping outside for the loop, and after the loop, you come back in, and it's like, oh, your hair's all messed up, and it's like, oh, I don't want people to take a picture of me now. Like, my hair is messed up from the wind and all that. And the first thing they go was, okay, now that you're heated up, let's grab a thermal, and you see your picture of yourself up on a screen. And it's just like, you can't get away that quick. And then at the end, he says, thanks for being such a great test crew. Come back and ride anytime.
Yeah.
So it continues to add to that. Like, hey, we're going to be doing more tests. We're not done yet, guys. Come on back. Test Track 2.0 was absolute garbage.
I don't think that's true. I think that it is a complete 180 of that personality.
It takes the entire personality of the attraction, and it has turned it into this...
It removes it. It 100% removes it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like the new attraction is more of a corporate commercial than a Disney ride. One of the first things you encounter is a message for OnStar on the ride.
Right, but once you're on the ride... But again, I mean, it talks about GM immediately in the pre-show of 1.0.
Yeah, but it's mentioned that GM are in a GM test facility. The entire pre-show of New Test Track is you're watching them design cars for Chevrolet, and you see them design a car with the line. Now it's going to be your chance to design a car in the Chevrolet design studio.
I don't know. I think that there is a bit of a point to that. I would admit that it feels like a commercial, which is hilarious because you can make a commercial at the end of the ride. Ha ha ha. But no, I would agree. It is very much a streamlined process. That's what it feels like to me. It feels like a streamlined process as opposed to having a lot of those like little tidbits in there. It's more of a like, want you to get involved. You don't have to be an outlooker necessarily. So you are going through, you're seeing what technology is. I just think our understanding of cars has changed so much that they are very tech. I mean, sometimes your car is your most technologically advanced thing you own.
Yeah, and I get that, but it doesn't feel like the most personality you get is the computer announcer on your car saying, "Here comes the final test." He says, they're doing all the stuff for I forget even what test it is. This is how forgettable it is I don't even remember half of the things that are said. The only thing is, I think the responsiveness test, and he goes, okay. It's
you say that in that funny way all the time when you're trying to be sarcastic.
I'll have to look it up on YouTube. It's when the laser trees hit after all of the green tests happen, after all the efficiency tests. I think it's responsiveness. Yeah, it is. It's like, okay, energizing for response or loading the responsive test, and he goes, okay, the responsive test is now being synchronized. But the way he says okay is just so... You
feel like it's very sarcastic. I feel like it's just a normal recording, but it does feel very computerized. It feels very robotic. And the entire attraction does.
It does, but it looks flashy. It looks like something you would expect to see in Future World at Epcot. And I can't fault it for that.
No. Honestly, the attraction itself has not changed. They did not change the ride. They changed the theming of the ride. Like, they changed portions where they do have the screens, where they do talk about OnStar, or they have, like, the City of Tomorrow portion and things like that. But the ride path, and essentially what it does, is the exact same as it was before. It literally has just rethemed, and with that retheming, it was determined that instead of having those tongue-in-cheek moments, which I will admit was very 90s, like that's why I say it reminds me of Home Improvement. It was a very dated thing, as opposed to going to, you're talking about the 2000s, the 2010s.
It was dated, but I mean, Dinosaur opened in 98, or Countdown to Extinction.
Dinosaur is dated.
Yeah, but Test Track was around the same time.
I know, but I'm not saying we can't compare that. Dinosaur itself is dated now, but they have way less focus on reality in Dinosaur as opposed to, as you said yourself,
Epcot is a real thing.
Epcot is a real thing. It was supposed to be a real place, a real GM test facility. Mm-hmm. And by taking that, you can't continue that realism, especially when you're switching sponsors or anything like that. But I could see why they wouldn't want to continue that with the path that Epcot is going in. And I'm sure that the Imagineers think about this stuff in advance. But a lot of the stuff at Epcot, particularly in Future World, has taken a shift to the more digitized personality. So it can be a little robotic or a little computer generated, but it is very streamlined. It's kind of that idea of slick lines, the future of tomorrow that never really existed from the 50s. So a lot of those concepts are considered more ideal for that location.
Which is boring.
In your opinion. I know plenty of people that appreciate Test Track 2.0 more than they appreciated 1.0. We have the kind of sense of humor that really enjoyed that other bit. But this is what I mean when I say, like, if an attraction has personality, there's no such thing as a bad personality. Test Track 2.0 specifically does not have a personality. It is supposed to show that the ride can function as itself without the gimmick. And it does that. It does that just fine. Whether or not you like it more is completely relative.
Another attraction, we're actually going to veer off the path here. We're going to go over to Islands of Adventure for Universal. So a few years ago, they retracked all of the Incredible Hulk roller coaster.
The Incredible Hulk!
And when they did that, they changed up the entire storyline of the attraction.
The storyline and the infrastructure.
Yeah, it was entirely gutted and redone. It was ridiculous. So it all happens on a portion of the park called Marvel Superhero Island.
Superhero Island.
So the idea is that a comet crashed and all the villains and all the superheroes from all the Marvel comic books have been unleashed. So if you ride the Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man attraction, the entire pre-show video is all this 2D animated type feature. Same thing with Doctor Doom's Fearfall.
Yes.
It's all this 2D animated type deal. Hulk's original incarnation was this 2D Bruce Banner, and you're entering his secret lab where he entered the gamma tube and he got transformed into the Hulk. And you're discovering this, and this is his last video before going for this final test where he became the Hulk. And you yourself are going to subject yourself to the gamma tube to see what happens. The original launch, you join the launch tube, and you hear Bruce say, I think this time it's going to work. And then you hear, like, coolant draining, and he goes, oh, no! And he roars as the Hulk. And that's when you get launched. And it had it was such a defining line of that attraction that Universal fans still quote it today. Theme park fans still quote it today as...
You quote it all the time.
Yeah, I think this time it's going to work. Like, it's one of those things that people don't forget. The new Hulk is a desert base, and it's the Hulk Project. And they're bringing in applicants to go through the gamma tube to become Hulkified themselves. And it is this very Test Track 1.0 to 2.0 type deal where they removed all of the verbiage and script and personality of the ride.
The character, yeah.
The characters. It doesn't fit with the rest of the land now. Don't get me wrong. It's nice and new and flashy, and it looks great.
And it fits on its own. If you didn't know
what was there
before, and this is similar to Test Track, if you didn't know what was there before, these are still good attractions. That doesn't change. But it does pull you out a little bit as someone who has experienced it, who has a preference of one or the other.
Yeah. And I miss the old one quite a bit. Which, maybe listen to headphones one time with it on.
Didn't they, no, you can't, because you have to have a metal detector. Didn't they change the actual, like, support beams when they redid the Hulk?
Yeah, so this is also on that personality hit. The original Hulk roller coaster, so the manufacturer of the roller coaster was B&M. And usually when they do these massive roller coasters, they fill the support beams with sand so that the track doesn't roar, it's not as loud as it needs to be. It's relatively quiet when it thunders through the track. The original Hulk, Universal opted to not put the sand in it, so that it had this very unique roaring sound as it flew through the track. By. And it was super unique, and it was this unforgettable sound that you can hear from across the park, that you knew the Hulk was going. And with the refurbishment, when they replaced the track entirely, they opted to fill it with sand now. So that roar no longer happens.
Yeah, the only time you really hear the Hulk is there's still a moment as you exit the tube where it has a roar. But other than that, it's actually a really quiet roller coaster.
Yeah. Which, I mean,
it's quite weird.
Very different attractions. Same thing. Very different attractions.
But, so I have one that is the same but different. And I think that part of it is a good different and part of it is horrid. So I'm thinking of Soarin' at both Disney California Adventure Park as well as Epcot, and talking about Soarin' over California versus Soarin' around the world. So specifically thinking of Epcot, when they changed this, they changed the queue. And I think that was an awesome change. So if you've ever been to Soarin' around the world, or Soarin', I'm just going to call it that, here at Epcot, it is actually based off of different architectures from 3 different airports?
3 different airports, yeah. So that was the original Soarin' was the 3 different airports too. But the big thing was that they changed the lighting drastically in the queue, and they changed how it all looked. But it's based off of 3 airports. It's based off of Charles de Gaulle, it's based off of Detroit Delta Terminal, and Chicago O'Hare.
It's very cool. And as someone who has traveled to those locations and been in those airports, you really do you're like, oh, wow, this is crazy. And if you're a tourist coming from those areas, it is kind of surreal to see it. So I think that's a really positive thing. And then you get to the actual changes that they made for
the ride.
So obviously they completely changed the ride itself. So the ride system is the same, but the experience is very, very different. And for me, this is one of the greatest losses of personality without saying anything in a Disney attraction. So there was so much in Soarin' over California that were just these funny little bits that happened. Whether it was the fly fishing person as you're going upriver.
The skier falling off the side.
The golf ball coming to hit you in the face with a Mickey on it.
There was all these little things on that ride. It was never about where you were in the world. It was never like, oh, I'm at the Taj Mahal and I know that. It's like I'm at a golf course, or I'm in the orange groves, or I'm on a river. And it was all showing off California in these very, I don't want to say dull ways, but very mature observations.
Very aesthetically pleasing visuals.
And it was all...
But the fact that you always went over things, and like everyone lifted their feet because of the way that the camera angle was. You're like, I'm going to hit the trees.
It was a very convincing and unique thing. One of the big things about personality changes from Soarin' to Soarin' Around the World was the transitions. So one of the big complaints that people had was that there was no transition between scenes in Soarin'. It just cut to the next scene. And now that we have transitions between scenes, I can't tell you how much I hate those transitions.
They are so rough. I personally find them very annoying. I don't see how it adds to things. I do love at the beginning how they have the cloud thing that you go through.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. But I think the reveal of the Matterhorn, I think the reveal of the Golden Gate Bridge is much more empowering. I also think that the original Soarin' score is much better than the current score.
I would agree with that 100%. I think that I would love to do a podcast talking about music at Disney parks and how music at any theme park, really, and how that can change and morph your experience. But I feel like Soarin' is a great example of that. Original Soarin' over California, the score would give you chills as you're on this ride. It was so good. And then the Soarin' Around the World, you can tell that they're like, well, we need to keep some of the original stuff and we'll just play off of it. And it just falls flat. It doesn't have the intrigue, and it doesn't have it doesn't emotionally connect.
Each section goes by way too quick, and it tries way too hard to connect to these areas. Whereas with Soarin' over California, a lot of the music stayed very much the same.
Yeah, it transcended the scenes, if you will.
Yeah, there was just a little change here and there. Like they added clip plops for the hooves of the horses in one scene. They added military drums to the scene for the Air Force Base. Just the little things added or subtracted really made the difference. But with Soarin' Around the World, it's like a whole... It's a whole change. And you're only getting a portion of the song for like 15, 20 seconds at a time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not good. I don't care what anybody says about Soarin' Around the World. I think it is absolutely a horrendous attraction. And it is a pure rendition of what Walt Disney Imagineering should not be doing. And I hope that they realize the mistake that they made with this ride.
I think it's hilarious, right? So obviously they shot everything. And if you look on it for a flat screen, they're beautiful shots. The shots they made, the shots they created as well, because there's a lot.
Well, they did all these behind the scenes. Well, no, they did all these behind the scenes videos that they showed at D23 on the Parks Blind and other stuff. That they flew to these locations to actually film these locations.
Some of them.
And then they said screw it, and they overlaid it all with CGI.
Some of them. Obviously, they have ones that are not, like the Matterhorn and the castle in Germany, and there's a whole bunch of things that they didn't overlay. Some of them have little things like wild animals or creatures, something to make you go, "Aw."
That polar bear is not real. I hope you guys know that.
Polar bear's not real. None of the polar bears are real. That whale is not real. But I will never get over the Taj Mahal sequence.
It's so bad.
I appreciate that they could not film there. I appreciate that that is a thing. It is a landmark. It's a giant thing. You can't fly to get those images. But it's very hard to look at for me. But looking at it on a flat screen, the artistry is beautiful. As soon as you put those things on a curved screen,
it's gone.
Suddenly, everything that you're thinking about when you're like, oh, it's flat, it's great. You get the Matterhorn or the Eiffel Tower going right angled. It's completely bent over in some of the seats. And the first one was very, very, very aware of this. So Soarin' Over California was very aware of these angles, which is why if you look at it, you are never looking at anything that is tall and
straight on. And that's why you approach the Golden Gate Bridge from the side. That's why you hit downtown LA at night.
So you don't see the curves of the buildings. So there's just a lot of things about it where you're like, all of these things that they felt like they planned out, including the personality, with those little things of a skier falling or the jokes or...
The hang glider.
The hang glider.
Everybody, you got off that ride, it's like, hey, we were next to that hang glider. Did you see that? Even though he was obviously CGI, you don't realize that at the time because it's so cool.
Yeah, it was one of those things. But going into Soarin' Around the World, I feel like they lost a lot of that personality.
They didn't lose it. They threw it out. They just disregarded it.
Well, I don't think that's true. I think that they were trying to create a personality for each of these locations without having to do anything. To let the locations speak for themselves. However, that's wonderful if you execute it perfectly. It's still not going to create the emotional connection because when you laugh at something, you're going to remember it more. It brings you endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. You know, that whole line of logic. But when it's just something... Like, I think the one thing that is the most interesting part of Soarin' Around the World is when you are following the kite at the Great Wall of China and you do that little, like, swoop up and dip. Mm-hmm. Because you can see they have a CGI'd man, and he looks very CGI'd. But as you're going over, he's, like, looking up and, like, giving you this weird face of, like, what is this thing? As if he's looking at the kite.
He's, like, the only person,
He's the only thing. And you don't see him. He's literally in, like, the bottom corner that if you don't look, this is how much I've been on this ride to see every angle. He's the only one that you're like, oh, he sees us. We are, he's interacting with or he sees the kite. He's interacting with something around him.
Even nothing else feels that way. Everybody in the Eiffel Tower at the end just ignores that there's a hang glider in front of them. Like, the polar bears look at it. You get attacked by a Monument Valley hawk. All of the Polynesian rowers just ignore it. Everybody kind of ignores it. And I don't get it.
It's just a very different idea of how to tell that story and the personality that comes across. And I just don't find it as fun. I think that's one of the major sore bits for me, is seeing like those kind of refurbishments, whether it be Test Track 1.0 to 2.0 or Soarin over California versus Soarin over the world, where it makes me a little worried about Disney's choices when they're overhauling attractions.
I think they're more looking for something flashy rather than trying to retell a story that was there before.
Well, we talked about this a little bit too. We obviously have not done it yet because no one has. But the Disneyland change from Snow White's Scary Adventure to Snow White's
Enchanted Wish? Maybe, whatever it is.
I don't know. I haven't seen the new one. But I know the clips that they changed. And we talked about this in terms of the original Snow White's Scary Adventure really focused on the personality of the queen, the evil queen. So as you're going through the queue line and you go around that little turret, you're seeing her workshop. And as you're going through the ride, you see her dungeon and see the cauldron and all that.
It's very dark and it's very
dark.
It was a very classic dark ride. And
which generally were meant to be scary.
Yeah, they're meant to be a little spooky. And this new one looks to be like, it's just,
It takes a lot of it, but it's shifting the personality and perspective to that of Snow White, which makes sense. Dark rides are meant to be kids' rides.
She's asleep half the movie.
Yes.
What's it going to do?
She's not asleep half the movie. It's like a tiny portion of the movie.
It's the best part, because she's not interfering with anything.
She's not interfering with anything anyways. She's cleaning. It's her entire thing is she cleans.
Maybe we'll get a Huntsman animatronic.
No. That's not going to happen.
That'd be wonderful. I'm not excited for this.
Talking about not having it be dark. Let's get a Huntsman animatronic. The guy is supposed to carve out her heart. Makes perfect sense. But those are the types of things where it's a shift in perspective and a shift in personality that it makes me a little concerned. And honestly, I shouldn't be concerned because I'm only concerned because we're stupid fan people who are obsessed with too many things.
Yeah.
Too many theme parks, too many details. But that is something that the shift in personality.
We've had this sort of discussion in real life numerous times.
Welcome to what it's like to be in a room with Brett and Kristen. You can ask anyone that knows us. This is normal conversation fodder.
Yeah, I'll be like, how do you feel about Soarin? Just randomly.
Everyone thinks we're crazy. It's fine. We accept that. At least I do.
Yeah, at this point. I think that wraps it up for this. Like, what attractions do you feel have a great personality? Or what lack personality? What
options are there that you've gone to that you're like, this one has the great personality? I can tell you about such and such till the cows come home. I'd love to hear it because I just really hope that we're not the only ones that think of these things.
Yeah, honestly, that would be very beneficial if somebody were like, hey, I thought of this attraction that has no personality. I'd be like, yeah, that'd be great.
Perfect. We'd love to learn more. Make sure to leave us a comment, or you can always reach out to us on any of our social medias at the Schmoofs, or you can follow Brett for his insanity on Twitter at Schmoofy. But I think that's all we have for this time. Thanks for sticking around, and we will see you next time.
Yeah. But signing out for the night, this is going to be Brett.
And Kristen.
Thanks for listening.
Night.